France will recognise a Palestinian state at the UN General Assembly in September, President Emmanuel Macron announced. The French head of state said, "True to its historic commitment to a just and lasting peace in the Middle East, I have decided that France will recognise the state of Palestine. I will make a formal announcement at the United Nations General Assembly in September." Including France, Palestine's statehood is now recognised by 142 countries, though Israel and the United States strongly oppose recognition. France would be the most significant European power to recognise a Palestinian state. Macron also said, "The urgent priority today is to end the war in Gaza and rescue the civilian population."
At least 4 children were killed and 17 injured in India's western state of Rajasthan after the roof of a school building collapsed, with dozens still feared trapped under the rubble. Rajasthan Chief Minister Bhajanlal Sharma said instructions have been given to the concerned authorities to ensure proper treatment of the injured children. According to local police officer Amit Kumar, some of the injured children were critical.
Britain's commitment to Australia was absolute, Defence Secretary John Healey said as the two countries' defence and foreign ministers held talks in Sydney on boosting cooperation, including deepening their commitments to the AU-KUS nuclear submarine partnership. Healey and Britain's Foreign Minister David Lammy were met by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese in Sydney, ahead of talks focused on boosting trade ties and progressing the AU-KUS partnership of Britain and Australia to build a new class of nuclear-powered submarine. The United States is reviewing the trilateral agreement struck in 2021 and has pressed Australia to increase defence spending to counter China's military build-up in the Indo-Pacific region. Healey said the AU-KUS is one of Britain's most important defence partnerships, and a treaty to be signed with Australia confirms Britain's commitment for the next half-century. Britain's Ministry of Defence said that the new British-Australian treaty will underpin each country's submarine programmes for 50 years, creating tens of thousands of jobs, and is expected to be worth up to £20 billion to Britain in exports over the next 25 years.
The United States lifted sanctions designated on several allies of Myanmar's ruling generals, 2 weeks after the head of the ruling junta praised President Donald Trump and called for an easing of sanctions in a letter responding to a tariff warning. Human Rights Watch called the move extremely worrying and said it suggested a major shift was underway in US policy towards Myanmar's military, which overthrew a democratically elected government in 2021 and has been implicated in crimes against humanity and genocide.
Brazilian Vice President Geraldo Alckmin said that he had reiterated his country's willingness to negotiate proposed US tariffs on imports from Latin America's #1 economy during a conversation on Saturday with US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Alckmin said he and Lutnick had a good conversation last week that lasted about an hour. The US has announced 50% tariffs on Brazilian imports starting on August the 1st. A measure US President Donald Trump has tied to judicial measures against former president and ideological ally Jair Bolsonaro, which had been accused of plotting a coup. Brazilian officials have been holding discussions with local companies to evaluate the potential impacts of the tariffs, which also prepare measures to mitigate those effects and studying potential countermeasures. But Brazilian authorities have said they have been struggling to contact high officials of the US government for direct negotiation.
The International Monetary Fund said it has reached a staff-level agreement on the first review of its extended fund facility with Argentina, potentially unlocking about $2 billion for the economically embattled Latin American nation. The executive board meeting for the review, part of Argentina's $20 billion loan program with the lender, is expected to take place later this month. The IMF said the program has started off strongly despite a more challenging external backdrop. With Argentina's inflation and poverty coming down, wealth growth has ticked up.